That's how it's going to be. At times I will be speaking, at the relevant time Mrs. Sweetman will be speaking, and I'm so honoured to have her here tonight. I have my own area of expertise, and I was very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity. But I think Mrs. Sweetman comes at this from a totally different perspective, things that I sometimes do talk about and allude to in my presentations, but I certainly aren't the one who has the qualifications behind that, where I'm able to present the research, and that's what Mrs. Sweetman's going to do today. I want to start by saying this. We have agreed that today is not about bashing up gaming sites. Today is about delivering to you the truth. So you have the knowledge you need that's going to enable you to know where gaming fits in your family. Now, gaming needs to fit in your family whereby it protects the health and well-being of your children. And your household is ticking along in a very I suppose, a pleasant way, a comfortable way, that it's not causing problems. That's the purpose of tonight. Some of the information we give to you will make it sound like that we are against gaming, but this is just the truth. It's not all positive when it comes to online gaming. So take out of the presentation things that you may feel personally apply to you. A big part of this as well is about empowerment. I would like you to know that you have the skills you need to do what's best for your kids when it comes to gaming. It's not about being an IT expert. It's about harnessing the skills that you already have and about applying that to technology. That you have a right to put these things in place, and then what you do, when you do, you're actually making a difference. So our job is to deliver to you the facts, things to consider and think about, whereby you can make informed decisions when it comes to gaming. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Sweetman to you. And like I said, she'll be coming on at various stages during the presentation. I'm coming to you from Brisbane, Queensland. Sorry you can't come up here. Our Premier's still got the borders closed. And Mrs. Sweetman's coming to you from Sydney.
I am. And Brett, please call me Jill. That's very generous of you, but please.
Jill, thank you. You can tell we've really planned this. No, we had planned it. Okay, look, thanks so much. I'm actually going to go straight into my part of it. And so you don't have to look at me all night, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Now, not all the information may relate directly to your family. Maybe it doesn't directly relate to you yet, but you have young kids, and as they grow, some of the information that you take on board tonight may be able to be utilised then. I am going to finish with my 5 strategies that I present in every single webinar that I do, because I think it's really what comes down to it. We can't know everything about technology, but there are principles we can grasp onto that can help manage everything to do with technology. So look, I'm quickly going to go through my background. Jill will probably outline a bit of her background so you know where her information's coming from and what her experience is. She works with a lot of young people. But I will go through my background so you know the perspective that I'll be delivering my messages from. I do have a law enforcement background. Ridiculous photograph, I know. Unfortunately, it's the only photograph of me in police uniform. That's why I use it. I was a Queensland police officer for 22 years, and as you can see, gender equity was huge in the Queensland Police in 1985. We had 2 females allocated to every 25, and they used to call it this man squad. So things have changed in our community. I like to think for the best. Now, what really defined me in the police was the fact that I was a detective for 16 years. And I probably arrested around 1,500 people for various criminal offences, everything from shoplifting up to murder. And this job really enabled me to see a face or a side of technology and human nature that not many people get a chance to see. We may be exposed to it every now and again, whether in the media or in our community, but that's sort of what I lived on a day-to-day basis. So I have a very good understanding of human nature and choices people make in certain circumstances, methodologies that people use to offend against others, things that people are looking for to achieve certain fantasies or desires that they have. It also taught me how to be very practical when it comes to analysing and identifying what people are doing in relation to actions which create evidence, how to put that evidence together into a format whereby it can be admissible in a court of law. So that's sort of the world that I was very used to. Now, why I actually now talk about cyber safety is that back in the prehistoric days of technology, 2000, I was charged with conducting a type of police investigation that which involved me assuming the fictitious identities of children going on the internet to look for child sex offenders, to locate them, identify them, and arrest them. Now, the people they got to do this job weren't IT experts. They got detectives. So I was doing exactly the same sort of job online that I was doing in the physical world. It was just in a different environment because I was dealing with people. And I've arrested a lot of adults, particularly men, who are using technology to abuse, harm, and commit sexual offences against children. Now, when they were arrested, they didn't go to cyber prison. As we know, they went to a real world prison. And what a great analogy to prove that my role as a parent and a carer, particularly when it comes to managing technology, is exactly the same role that I insist on having and know I need to have when it comes to managing my kids in the house. You have a right to manage technology. When you put rules and boundaries in place, when you say no to particular types of programs, or you don't like this game, you don't like the concept behind this game, you have a right to put the things in place that you think are best for our children. Does that mean they're going to like all these decisions? I hope not. That's our job as a parent. I've got 4 kids, like I said, and if every decision I make with them and technology is popular with them, I'm not doing my job properly. So we have a right to manage technology. The things you're going to hear tonight, you have a right to play that role. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, you don't trust your kids. It means you're a good parent, and it's that you don't trust the nature of the world that you live in. And that's why you're putting these things in place. So it was my job to go online. Someone said to me, I commonly get asked by children when I do presentations. I did a webinar to kids today. Did you ever find bad people in gaming sites? I tell kids the truth. They deserve to hear it. Just like you say to them, not everyone in the world is a nice person. They need to know that. They can't trust everybody in the world thinking the world's perfect. We teach them that there's dangers out there. The internet's the same. I say, I can tell you, more than half the online child sex offenders that I arrested were initially located in gaming sites. This doesn't mean games are bad, but all this means games is a place where real people go. So our role needs to be very effective when it comes to our kids playing games. Where are people online who want to do the wrong thing by kids going to go? They're going to go where children go. 2 particular areas: social media sites and gaming sites. And I'll talk a little bit about those definitions, but that's where they go. But please don't be too concerned. Kids don't just become victims online by pure chance. Things have to be put in place. Criminals have to go through certain procedures, through certain steps to be able to do the wrong thing. So I'll explain that more. I'll just give you one example. If we teach our kids that when you play a game to have fun, you don't play a game so people you've never met who aren't part of your life have the opportunity to ask you for your personal information. And do you know what? If they don't hear these messages from us, they're probably not going to hear it from anybody. And you say to your kids, hey, have fun playing the game. But if someone's not your friend, if you haven't met them face to face, don't hand your personal information over. So they're playing a game, and this person in the game says, hey, you're awesome at this game. My name's Tom. I'm 15. I'm from Sydney. What's your name? Where are you from? Now, if we have instructed and educated our kids well, and they had the mindset, they had the presence to know, hey, I don't answer those questions. I just play games to have fun. People shouldn't be doing that. And do you know where they've got this idea? From you, from their school, from another interested adult. And do you know what? If they don't answer that question, and that was a child sex offender, do you know what your child has done? They have taken total control, and there's nothing else that person can do. They can't make you a type of kid. And that person needs information. Well, there's nothing they can do. They're being totally disempowered. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to move on because your child has chosen not to share personal information. That's how these little messages work. It chips away at risk. So as we go through, know that the messages we have are really important. Please, if things are ticking along nicely, everything seems to be going well, don't kick kids out of games. It's just us considering these things so we're empowered to pass this on to our children. So like I said, it was my job to pretend to be a kid on the internet. I do generally talk about the illusions that the internet creates, which I won't talk about tonight. But I've spent thousands of hours pretending to be a child in online games. Most kids play games, to have fun. I can remember there's a game called Roblox. And I can remember I wanted to find out exactly what this was all about and how these kids used it. So I went round to this gentleman's house, and he had a young man who was 10 years of age, and he loved playing this game Roblox. So I sat down, and the dad said to him, well, if this man just wants to, and the boy knew me, I spoke at his school. He said, this man wants to just see how you go playing Roblox and what it's all about. So I sat down with this young man. We started playing Roblox, and his dad and I were interested in the conversations people were having. This young man could not care less what was going on there. He was 100% focused on what he was doing in that game and was not interested in the conversation. And I would say if you have young children or you instruct young children, most of them just want to play the game. So one thing that should always be put in place, have the chat turned off. You don't want the chat on, just go in and play the game. So I have seen that world through the eyes of a young person. The first thing I want to talk about very quickly is time limits. Now, one of the most common questions I get asked by parents is this: how much time should my child be online? And it even hammers down further than that is, how much should I be letting my kids play games during the week and on the weekend? That is one of those questions that I can't answer. Every child is different. Every personality is different, and no one knows your kids better than you. Every dynamic in a family is different. So when it comes to time, it's really going to come up to you as down to you as a family. But this is a quite common response I get. I will have a parent stand up and say, my kids are allowed half an hour gaming during the week, each day, if they have all their chores done and it's going okay. On the weekend, they play the sport, they do what they need, other things they need to do or they're required to do, and then they might get a bit of gaming. Some parents say there's no gaming during the week. Some parents actually say my kids aren't interested in gaming. Now, that's a pretty healthy scenario. If the kids aren't interested in it, we don't need to push them towards that. But I just want to show you some research results. A report was put together by the Health Department, Australian Federal Government, and it was in relation to, it was called Australia's Physical Activity and Sedentary Behaviour Guidelines. Now, this was through research and case studies, and it wasn't only to do with technology, it was to do with everything else in our life, like sleep and sport and diet. And it wasn't only for young people, it was for adults as well. But this section here is in relation to what the Australian government, as a result of that report, recommended the amount of screen time outside of school for children. Now, under 2 years of age, 0. And I think the information from Jill tonight is going to sort of highlight to you why it's 0. Not just because we feel, well, there's no need, it's because of the effect that it can have on the development of a very young person. So Jill's going to talk a little bit about that, why the government says it's 0. 2 to 5 years of age, maximum 1 hour a day outside of school. Now, what I'm going to say with all of these is this: they don't have to have any. If they have 0 screen time outside of school, I do not think it is going to impact on the outcome of their life in a negative way or what they can achieve. If you went on a 2-week cruise and your child couldn't get onto the internet, I don't think when they get back, their life is any worse off. Technology, particularly the countries that build the devices, the websites and the games and the apps, they create a lot of credibility around themselves to give their product a lot of credibility, so we feel the need to use it. So a lot of what kids do outside of school with technology is all sacrificable. I don't think your kids are going to get to 35 and say, Mum, I've never forgiven you for not letting me play Fortnite when I was 12. My life would have turned out so much better. I could have been a doctor. So we got to put this in perspective. Games generally are just a little bit of an added extra. They're a pastime. They generally don't create something of value in a person's life. Doesn't mean they don't play them, because kids do need to have fun. Now, the next one, 16 to 17. I know that's a big year gap, but this is what the government made available. 2 hours a day, maximum outside of school. So that's just what the government put there. Look, Jill will be coming in shortly. I just want to talk very quickly about the gaming industry itself. These companies don't just build a game and put it out there. They spend millions and millions of dollars every year, not on the software, not on the game itself. They spend millions of dollars on brain research, whether it's a social networking site or a gaming site. Their main business strategy is to manipulate our brain so we make the choice that makes them money. That doesn't make them bad, but that's what they're there to do. They exist for one person, they exist for themselves. Not one of these companies is there for your child. Your child is not even a real person to them. They are data on a screen that they use, like the other billions of bits of data, to make as much money as they can. So Jill's going to talk about how games trigger certain things in the human brain. Now, as adults, we can't think that our kids think the same. As we grow, we do become more resilient. We also develop in a way whereby we're probably more able to control desires and actions, where young people may not be to that stage yet. And this has got nothing to do with intelligence or how well they can use the internet. It's got to do with the stage of their development. But all of these games are trying to achieve the same thing, making as much money as they can. Now, I'm not going to go through any particular game tonight because maybe some people, they're not using that. Their kids aren't using that game. So there's wasted time. My messages are going to be very, very generic because these programs all try to achieve the same thing. It's called a sales funnel. It's about keeping the kids in the game as long as they can, because they've worked out through their research that the longer someone's in the game, the more chance that that person at some stage is going to spend money. So their job is to attract people to those games and keep them in there. Now, I'm going to hand over to Jill, who's going to talk a little bit about the type of industry that we're dealing with when it comes to our kids playing these games.
Thank you, Brett. These statistics are quite alarming, and it comes from an organisation called Newzoo, and these are 2018 statistics. But if you have a look at this and see that the gaming industry projected to earn 137.9, so let's call it $140 billion in 2018. Now, one would very safely say that figure has increased quite a bit. I think they were projecting something like a 17% increase year on year for the gaming industry. So just that alone indicates if we follow the money, as Brett said, our children and ourselves, we're not really playing a game as such. What we're playing is millions of dollars of computer intelligence on the other side of the screen to keep us there. So the enormous money, the quantity that these gaming companies accrue is using a different style of currency. Yes, they're acquiring capital by all means, but what they're doing is acquiring the attentional currency of us as people, but particularly those of our children. And that's what becomes concerning, because it is taking away the free will. Brett, do you have a comment on that?
I absolutely agree. And I know that you're going to talk about the effect on the brain that can impact the ability to make those informed decisions.
Sure.
Look, when people become adults and play games, there are even adults that have a lot of problems. But every year I go down to ADFA, the Australian Defence Force Academy, and I train every single recruit from 19 years of age up to 26. And I talk about what we're going to talk about shortly is something called gaming disorder, just something that we consider as a parent. And we can be aware of that so we can see if the indicators are starting to occur. But I had a young man who came up to me and said, I think I'm addicted to gaming. And he was 19 years of age. And I said, well, you're not addicted to gaming. I said, the reason I know you're not addicted to gaming is because you're at ADFA. I said, if you were truly addicted to gaming, you'd be at home in your pajamas. You'd have a bucket beside your bed to go to the bathroom, that you would be angry all the time. You wouldn't be eating properly. You wouldn't have a job. You would, if your parents turned the router off, you'd get angry and punch holes in the wall. I said, that's an actual addiction to gaming. And we're going to talk about that shortly, but that's losing that ability to make those informed decisions. So that's what the games are designed to do. And look, it's not so much about bashing up the games. It's up to an individual to decide whether that's ethical or not. But when it comes to young people, it's they really need our assistance when it comes to. And I think what Jill's saying is our children are up against billion-dollar companies. So that's why we need to be involved when they're playing these games.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true, Brett. Thank you. And do you have the next slide there, which shows the esports? Did you pop that in? I mean, isn't this extraordinary? This is a whole lot of people, many tens of thousands of people, all watching esports. So it is big business and it's big money. And that's the sort of thing that we're talking about, is that the level of computing power, the money that's going behind the screens to keep our attention, and also the various elements of that, like the gambling and so on, which is unfortunately sometimes the games are a portal into that, which doesn't help us or help our children. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, look, the games that I've actually written an article on my website that I would encourage you to go read up after the presentation. They're called freemium games. So a very effective business model now, which a lot of companies are adopting. It's where the game is actually free to play. So you download the game and start playing it, then the hard sell comes, and it's an incredibly hard sell. And I don't know whether some of the adults here, well, there would be some of the adults who've played games, that you find it's very easy to get into the game and go straight back to where you finished. The games are very short till you get to the wins. So there's lots of little wins in there. We'll talk about what else is in there shortly. But then to get out of the game, there's a lot more clicks to get out of the game. It's harder to get out of the game than get into the game. So for young people, that's just another trigger that causes them to stay in that game, in that they're trying to get out of the game and they don't, so they continue to play. So these are some of the things. I just thought it was important that you understood some of the things that were happening behind the scenes. Every single thing on that screen, every single sound, every single graphic is designed to make money, and it's designed through research. So look, it is a big industry. There are people who make money out of gaming, even when my kids were growing. We look at that stadium there. Actually, I think I can see Jill in the audience there. But when my kids were growing up, they're saying, I'm going to be a gamer. And like a lot of things with technology, it sounds very easy to do that. But look, I think there'd be a lot of considerations when it comes to, as our children grow, allowing them to game in an extended way. So, yes, look, it is a big industry, and I don't think it's going anywhere. Potential issues. Look, the main one I want to talk about, and Jill's going to talk about this. This is where we're going to talk about the effects on the brain. Last year, the World Health Organization introduced a new disease into the world. We got a new one this year, COVID-19, but last year they introduced a new disease, and it's called gaming disorder. So a disorder is a disease. And after years of research and case study, because the World Health Organization doesn't do this lightly, they have introduced this as a disease in the world, which means it can be treated officially by a medical professional. And Jill's going to talk about why they've introduced this as a disease. And it's really about the effect on the brain. It's not a viral disease, of course. It's a psychological disease, such as things we hear in our community like drug addiction, like gambling, like alcoholism. So it's probably in the same realm as that. Now, if your young person plays something like Minecraft and you think, oh no, they're addicted to gaming every night at 6 o'clock, I can't get him off Minecraft or her off Minecraft. There's a battle, they start crying or they get upset that they're leaving halfway through the game. That's not addiction to gaming, but it could be the commencement of it. Now, if we're going to say that it's like something like gambling, someone who's got a problem with gambling, an addict with gambling, the difference is quite often young kids don't get exposure or access, or they don't have the desire to do those things with alcohol, drugs, and gambling. With gaming, it can start very, very early and take hold very early. So that's why we really got to be on the ball when it comes to managing what our kids are doing with games online. And Jill was right; it quite often extends into the gambling. It's that need for that win. So, Jill, was there something? Yes, there is, that you would like to say there?
I would. Thank you so much, Brett. There's a couple of things around that. And if I may, you were talking before about why have the guidelines been put in about children under 2 not in fact having any screen time at all. There was a very important study that came out of Canada last year from the University of Alberta, and this was a longitudinal study that involved around 2,500 families. And what the study showed was that children who were exposed to screens and who had a fairly heavy diet of screens 2.5 hours or more when they were 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years of age versus the children of those same ages that had less than 30 minutes a day. So they were comparing children who'd had 2.5 hours or more of screen time in a day, and they're toddlers, they're 2, 3 and 4 and 5, versus those who had less than half an hour. They found that 2 or 3 years later, those children were missing really important educational and developmental milestones, really important milestones, so that they were not going to school ready, so they were not able to sit and focus, so they were not able to build up short-term memory and therefore long-term memory. And what they looked at was that the children who'd had 2.5 hours or more when they were young, so we're talking several years down the track here, that they were 5 times as likely to have a clinically diagnosed behavioural problem. In other words, they couldn't sit still, they couldn't focus. And alarmingly, they were almost 8 times as likely to meet the criteria for ADHD. Now, do they necessarily have ADHD? Not necessarily, but they were hitting enough of the criteria, 8 times as likely. Now, that's extraordinary. And the world over, Dr. Dimitri Christakis is the editor of the most prestigious journal, JAMA, which is the Journal for the American Medical Association or Academy, Pediatrics. He says that children today, by 5 years of age, they're already looking at 4.5 hours of screen time, which is 4 times and more over the guidelines. So there's really something to think about here, and that is that the choices that we're making today won't seem like choices until they're too late. So why I'm saying that is the choices that we're making with gaming, with the amount of screen time, even having television on as a background, that there is a legacy for that, and that it's really important to determine that we may not see the effects of that for years to come. Brett, for me, that's a key point. Would you like to add to that?
Look, I think the effects on the brain, just from what I've seen from my experience, people I've spoken to, other experts I've heard speak at universities, there's so many different aspects to it. That's only in relation to the human brain. One conference I went to, and there was a very renowned doctor from Canada said that with gaming such as and gambling, it's based on a lot of little wins. Yes. And they've worked this out, and that triggers a particular part of the brain that gives a person a feeling of pleasure. And he said that when that part of the brain is unnaturally hit that much, that it desensitizes that part of the brain and that it's harder to stimulate. So what they're finding is people who do extended gaming find it very difficult to experience, or harder to experience, pleasure in the physical world. So I have spoken to Jill about that before, and she is aware of that. So the different effects are on the brain. Would I be right in saying that we don't truly know the extent of the effects?
No, that's true, Brett, but the illustration there, and I think it's an important one, the image that's up there now, is, if we get a little bit technical for a moment, because neuroscience is my particular area of interest, we're looking at what's called the nucleus accumbens, which is the part of the brain that produces dopamine. And what we're seeing here is that the brain lights up like a Christmas tree with people who are gaming to excess, the same as if they were gamblers, the same as if they were involved with substance abuse. So the other thing that concerns me, and again, I'm only interested in online games to look at why they're changing the structure of the brain. And as you just identified, because the body is being asked to produce so much dopamine, so the children and adults, of course, are getting multiple dopamine hits every minute. The body was never meant to experience that. So the nucleus accumbens is actually growing in size. It actually gets larger. What happens, though, the potential for that is, particularly with young children who have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain, the executive part of the brain, which is critical for thinking, for saying, I've had enough, for not lashing out at their siblings, not swearing at their parents, to be able to consider elements and also to self-regulate. That part of the brain is not being developed at the expense of other parts that are being developed. And that's where my deep concern lies.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. There's not much more I can add on that. But look, I get a lot of feedback from parents who, you know, they're seeing displayed behaviours that they see how the behaviours are changing within their children, and they know themselves that it's to do with games. And I'm going to talk shortly about, you know, the types of games that are and aren't good for young people. I can recall, while I remember, I went to a primary school in the Redcliffe area in Queensland, and the principal said that we had 3 boys, young boys in primary school. They were playing a game called Need for Speed, which enables the player to commit crimes, to harm other people, to you know, break rules. And he said what was interesting, he said those 3 young men, he said we didn't know it at the time, they started to display very aggressive behaviour at school, physically aggressive behaviour, and using language that wasn't consistent with what was expected at the school. They brought the parents in, and funnily enough, they found that those 3 boys were playing this 15 plus game called Need for Speed. 2 of the parents took the information on board, and they removed their children from that game. One parent, for whatever reason, decided not to and allowed their child to start playing that game. And funnily enough, the principal said that child had to be recalled to the school. The parents had to be recalled to the school because the child's behaviour just got worse. So, look, that's just another example that I was given by a principal at a school in relation to some of the behavioural effects. And of course, that must, you know, that's indicating there's a change that's happening within those young people. So, managing gaming. Now, Jill, you were going to talk about this slide?
I'm happy to talk about this slide, Brett. Some of us may remember, and not that I was around then, mind you, the coal miners, the indication of that whether it was safe for coal miners to actually, or for them to send fellows down deep into a coal mine, was to send a canary down. And if the canary came up and it was alive, that was good news, because that meant that it was safe to send these lovely young men who were working very hard in the coal mines. And I use that as the analogy. You know, we often say that the canary in the coal mine is the first indicator. It's the first premise that maybe something's not quite right. And I think all of us, and I can do it in my own family because I know that we're not angels here. When my husband's in the other room working with his computer, our tones of voices change between the rooms and we can misinterpret each other. So for me, that's a canary in the coal mine, that we should be face to face when we have communication. But I think within all our families, there will be little behaviours, there'll be little things, you know, a tone of voice. I know parents will say to me, gosh, even when they're on YouTube for an extended period of time, I notice that the tone of voice that the child uses with me has changed. So I think it's worth noting that it's not always a good thing to say, well, maybe it's just a phase they're going through, or everybody's doing it, or, you know, somehow we normalize this, when really within our own families, we have our own ethics, we have our own values, we know what's important for us. And I think it's worth paying attention to that and knowing when the games are really taking too much of a precedence, too much of a priority. If they're part of a portfolio of other things that the children are doing, that's fine. It's when it tips over into that area where perhaps it's not entirely healthy. Brett, do you have something you'd like to add there?
Yeah, look, not only for gaming, but it certainly applies to gaming. What I've found from my experience is that when issues or problems are being created online, whether it's behavioural or what they're being exposed to, they're generally manifest in the physical world. And that's how we can really pick up if there's a problem. I say to young people, if you have a problem online, you don't leave it online, you take it with you. It's about people. So look, some of the indicators that we may want to look for, that canary is, the changes in aggressiveness, changes in language, changes in diet, changes in they're not getting as much sleep as they want. They talk about nothing but the game. When we're talking to them, they seem very vague. Maybe they're just thinking about the game and they're finding it hard to connect and interact with people. They don't want to go to school as much. They don't want to play sport anymore. So a lot of these physical world indicators can come back and be attributed to something that may be occurring in gaming. Now, I will say this, and I said it at the start, I believe that there's so many similarities in human beings, biology-wise, but some young people do have differences in that some of my kids weren't interested in gaming. So we had to be less diligent in relation to, managing the gaming. They just did the right thing. And they weren't that interested. They'd play for a little while, then they'd get off. Or they'd only play when their friends came over. So that's something we've got to watch as well. Our kids may not be interested in gaming, but if other kids are coming over and visiting and maybe even staying overnight, what can happen there is that child may be really into gaming, and our child, just to be part of it, games. Our son, he never ever played Minecraft. Game for young kids, and look, it's got a good lot of, it's got some pretty good concepts in it. It's teamwork, and you build things. You can connect with other people and communicate. But we went round to a friend's place, and he played for a number of hours Minecraft with our friend's son. That night, he had nightmares. And we believe it was because of that extended exposure to that game. They are very intense, particularly in games like that where you're really involved in the game and it sort of becomes part of what's going on in your mind. So that's how it affected him. He never actually played that game again. So we were, quite interested that it gave him nightmares, and that sort of gave us a reason to maybe pull him away from that, because he did ask a couple of times after that, can I have Minecraft? And, it was only, when kids demand something and it feels like that, it's the end of the world if they don't get it. That desire, I found, is very short-lived. So they'll say, I want this. And if we can push it out a bit, quite often that desire dies and we don't have to deal with that. So I've found that as our kids were growing, that I need Minecraft. I want Minecraft on the weekend. Hey, let's sit down and have a look, and maybe we can have, see what it's all about. Oh, no, I'm busy. And he'd be off doing something else. So that could be one strategy in not just saying yes instantly when it comes to the demands of our children. Because one thing I found, once it's in, it's very hard to get out, particularly if it's starting to cause problems. That's when it's really hard to get out. So I have seen a couple of questions coming up, and I am going to answer them, and they're awesome questions. And I am getting into the strategies very shortly. Look, what are I did put up there some of the issues in relation to gaming. Look, of course, there's we're considerate of the addictive nature of games, but also all those issues that you as caregivers and parents and educators maybe know that young people can face with technology. Everything, nothing is exclusive to social media, cyberbullying, exposure to inappropriate contents, indecent language, predatory behaviour. All of these issues that we can associate with social media can also apply to technology because, to gaming. Games are social media sites. I'll tell you my definition of social media sites. Any program that brings people together, generally that allows people who aren't part of our physical world circle to come together, interact and share information. That's a social networking site. Now, if that's a social networking site, any game that allows chat, communication, creating a profile, That is a social networking site. So why I'm saying this is this. Please don't feel that, I don't want my child to have social media, but it's okay to have games because they're different. No, they're exactly the same. So we think the same when we're deciding what is and isn't appropriate in our home. Now, all the games come and go. When I was going into schools last year, if I had have said anything negative about a game called Fortnite, I would have things thrown at me by the students. They were bowing down to that game everywhere I went around Australia 12 months ago. I can go into a school now, and if I mention the game Fortnite, this is what I get. Oh, lame. Every game comes and goes. Some of them will lose popularity, then they'll come back again. I mean, TikTok, I know it's not a game, but it was starting to lose customers dramatically because it was becoming unpopular because, people were sick of it. They wanted to move on. They wanted something new. But then along comes the pandemic. People are at home more. They want something to entertain them. TikTok membership went up again, and the amount of time people stayed there went up. When this is over, it'll probably go down. Games are exactly the same. They come and go. They try and reinvent themselves. Some of the most popular ones at the moment, and they've been around for a long time, and that is Minecraft, Roblox, particularly for young kids. Things like Need for Speed has hung around. Red Dead Redemption. Now, these are 15 plus games. So what I'm going to be talking about now are some of the strategies that we can use to help manage games. We have a right as a parent to determine what games are and aren't played. Some of the things we can look at is this, the age requirements. And I mean, this takes away some of the pressure from you, where you say to your kids, oh, look, this is for 15 plus. You're younger than that, so you can't play this game. And you know one of the common responses you'll get? Oh, but Johnny down the street, he's allowed to play it. So you can respond, so you want us to do what other families are doing? Yeah, okay, but I'm going to pick the family, and they're going to be a lot stricter than we are. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't make it okay for our family. And I can guarantee you, you're going to be told all the people who do have it. You're not going to be told all the people who don't have it. Do you know most parents think pretty much the same? And if you feel I only want my kids to play age-appropriate games, most parents are thinking exactly the same. So just because other families are doing it or we're told that doesn't make it okay for our kids. So these programs are rated for a reason. So I would certainly adhere to the requirements. Always know that every child is different. There can be kids who social network at 15 years of age. They don't have very many big problems. Some kids social network at 15 years of age and have huge problems. Why? Because their personality is different. Different things affect them in a different way. They've faced different trauma in the physical world. Maybe they've just gone through a family separation, and that's caused them a little bit of low self-esteem, and they're looking for that to be massaged. But all of a sudden they get the opposite, and it has a devastating effect on them. Games are the same. We look at the personality of our children. The other thing we look at is the concept of the game, and this will depend on the age of your children, and like Jill mentioned, your values. So what's the concept of this game? You might be thinking, look, my son or daughter, they're 10. What's Fortnite all about? It's a shoot 'em up game where, you're competing against other people. You can communicate. It's pretty aggressive. It's pretty violent. There's weapons involved. So you know what? I don't want my child playing those types of games. I want them playing, if they're going to play a game, maybe a sporting game like FIFA, soccer, or football, or maybe driving a little cart in a game that's, around a little racetrack. So they're sort of the games that we may consider when it comes to what is and isn't appropriate for our family. But what I'm going to have, that's what I'm talking about when I say we have a right to decide what games, apps, and programs our kids use. That's up to us. Now, I'm going to tell you shortly how we do that. Actually, no, I'll tell you now. I had parents who say to me, I don't know anything about this game. We don't have to know much, but there's things that we may have to know, or we don't have to do much, but we have to do something. I'll give you an example. My son comes to me and said, Dad, I want to play Fortnite. Do you know what, as a parent, I can say, I'm not going to say yes now. I want to sit down and have a look at it because there's some games out there that probably aren't good for our family, and I want to make sure you're going to have fun. So I just want to have a look at it first. When I get a chance, I can do a 5-minute Google search. Everything a parent needs to know about Fortnite. And it could take me to a site called, remember this one, or write it down, Common Sense Media, that reviews programs for parents, and they're all reviewed. And I can read an article that'll take me 5 minutes on everything a parent needs to know about Fortnite, watch one video in YouTube, and then within 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to know everything there is to need to know about the game Fortnite as a parent. I'll know more than any student. I'll know what the game's all about. I'll know some of the issues it can create. I will know what its concepts are. I will know how many people are involved, whether it's got a chat facility, what age it's recommended, and also that if I choose to allow my child to play it, things that I can put in place to make it safe, to make it manageable. So that's how we stay in control of what games our kids are playing. We may need to find out a little bit. Do you know what? Most kids won't mind you sitting down beside them and watching them play the game. And do you know what? Within 5 minutes, a couple of things is going to happen. You're going to know everything about this game. And guess what else is going to happen? You're going to be bored out of your brain as to how simple this is and think, how could anyone have fun here? But at least you have an understanding. And do you know what else? Your kids know that you're part of that. So the next one, time limits. They are essential, absolutely essential when it comes to young people and games. Like Jill was explaining, our kids are dealing with billion-dollar companies. So we have to put the time limits in place. And do you know what this does? Makes it very generic. You might say, okay, you can have you can play games for half an hour after school on a school night. Do you know what? It doesn't matter what game they're playing. It's the games they're allowed to play, but it doesn't matter what game. They get half an hour. So time limits are essential when it comes to games, where it can and can't be used. I would suggest the more you can keep technology out of the bedroom in a public space, the more you are going to repay yourself, your child, and your family gold for the rest of your life. That is one of the best things a parent can do, getting our kids when they're young used to using technology in a public space. Now, I know that doesn't mean that they can never do the wrong thing in a public space. But in some of my other presentations, I outlined the benefits that parents get for relying on that age-old practice of getting technology out of the bedroom when they can. It's not always possible. When kids grow, those sort of things change. But if you can, that is a good place to start in the home. Who they can and can't connect with. Now, I'm going to go to one of the questions that I had. Jenny said, should kids be allowed to play online with people they don't actually know? Again, this is going to come down to you and your family. You may have a rule when your kids particularly are younger that you can play games, you're not allowed to communicate. That's one step. That's the extreme. The next one is this. Yes, you can connect in games and share messages with your friends from school or people you know face to face. The next step is this. Yes, you can play games with people you don't know, but you don't communicate with them. Yes, you can play games with people you know, but you don't share personal information. You just play the game and talk about the game. So they're the different stages that we can go through when it comes to connecting with other people online. We say to our kids, if you're connected to someone in a game and they leave a message or they communicate and they use language that makes you upset, that makes you scared, you are to delete that person. See, these 6 areas relate to our rules. You're to get away from that person. You're to have a break from the game. You're to report them online. Doesn't matter who they are. So if they make you feel uncomfortable, you get away from that person in the game. So there's some of the things to do with what we can consider when it comes to who we can connect with. Language. Now, I believe, and I've got 4 kids, and I know this doesn't always work, I believe that we should be instilling the same values when it comes to communicating with other people that we instill in the physical world. It should be transferred to technology. And do you know what? I have some people who say, oh, yeah, but kids can just get on and use bad language. I say, yeah, they can walk out in the street and use bad language. Doesn't mean we don't tell them where they stand. Doesn't mean they haven't got something to grasp onto when it comes to our values and what's expected and what's really normal behaviour. I said, that's our job to tell them that. Yeah, if they want to use bad language, they can. But we say to them, if you use that language, you get caught, there's consequences. The same as in the physical world. You tell them the rules. If they break the rules, there may be consequences associated with that, and everybody learns. And do you know what's going to happen online? I've noticed this phenomenon. Our attention gets drawn to the bad stuff. That's why one of Facebook's main business strategies is to make you and your family scared and angry all the time. They don't want you to be happy. They don't want you to have a good life. They want you to be scared. They want you to be angry, because they know through their research that that's the information that people get drawn to. And that's the information that gets shared the most. And that's what makes them the most money. Now, that's a business strategy that has been revealed by a former employee of Facebook. So their attention is going to get drawn to the bad stuff. So please don't say to you, don't believe that everyone uses that language. Do you know what's going to happen? They won't see the billions of people who don't use bad language on the internet. Their attention will get drawn to the bad people using the bad language, the bad stuff, and that will start to normalize it. That's why we say to them, no, yeah, those people are using that. That doesn't give you the right to use that language. And the sixth one, outlining to our kids what to do if they have a problem, what we expect them to do. Some of those things can be a rule. It might be, hey, if someone exposes you to a sexually explicit image, even in a game, or I send it to you through a chat, you're just to let me know about that. I'm not going to kick you out of the game, but I'm going to help you fix that problem so you can get on with it. I just need to know that something like this happens. So maybe that's something that you require. That's one of the rules to get that communication going. But saying to our kids, hey, look, games are great, but if you do have concerns, I want you to come and talk to me about it, or I expect you to block and delete people or to report them online. That's taking control. So outlining to our kids what to do if they have a problem. So I'm very quickly going to go through, because I want time for questions, but I'm going to go through some of the strategies that I have. Those last six, I hope you took a photograph of the screen. They relate to the rules, how to manage gaming in the home. I know that some of this sounds a little bit concerning, but I just wanted you to be aware as a parent of some of the things that you may need to consider. So we set clear rules and boundaries, and it relates to those six areas. I'm going to leave that on the screen for a little while. Maybe it can, you can take a screenshot of that. I've got a photograph, from Robin to Jill, so I assume that's been answered. I'm with the ACCMA. Is that the Australian Communication? No. We also review apps and games. We are Australian and all reviews have a child development background. Hey, fantastic. Martha, would you be able to share a link to your website for me and everyone else in the room? That'd be awesome, Martha, if you could do that. Do you know what this is about? Finding places on the internet. There's no one solution to this. It's because we're dealing with people. It's going to be about chipping away, just getting some basic strategies, relying on those strategies, and then implementing them over and over and over. What technology tools are available to do automatic parental control, especially for gaming, things like time limits, access, and schedules? Look, I've got to be a little bit careful here. I am a trusted provider with the government, with the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. So Martha's shared that website. Fantastic. So I've got to be very careful with, dealing with third parties or other companies. But I do so. I've got a very small commercial arrangement with a company called Family Zone that provides software that can work on devices, and it can even, if you have one of their boxes in your house, it can manage gaming consoles such as Xbox, PlayStation, but also phones, tablets, laptops. And they've got some good software that can regulate time. It can block certain apps from being downloaded or going to certain websites. It can let you know what apps, games are being downloaded, and it sends it to you as the parent. We use that for the life of our two youngest kids. It didn't exist for our older kids, and we found it to be a very good program. But there's other great software out there. There's so much there. There's ones built in to devices like Apple and Android devices. Also, there's Norton Semantic. There's Disney makes a good one called Disney Circle. But the one that we use is one called Family Zone, and that's you can read more about that on the front page of my website. Martha has shared that website. Thank you very much. Sarah has been talking to Brendan, which is great. Yeah,
Brett, if I may.
Yeah, Netgear's got the Genie app, and that's got filtering, monitoring capabilities as well. Yes, Jill, sorry.
No, not at all. Robin was asking about perhaps reversing some of the concerns with the brain. And for some people that have been affected, that's a really tricky question because we don't necessarily have the data that can show that. But what is really important is that, as you have identified, to take control within the family home and to limit the times on devices. My recommendation would be that there aren't games before school, that there aren't games before homework is done, and that we really spend the time with our children. You know, we have, and I know that seems a glib thing to say, but we have the first generation of children who are sleep deprived, and we have the first generation of children who are touch deprived. And I mean touch within the family context of loving and hugging and, you know, giving kisses and cuddles that send them off to bed at night and things like that. And I think, you know, I'm wondering whether just our busyness and our focus on devices is taking us away from the importance of deep family connection and deep family time. And the dads listening to this might be interested that the average father in America spends less than 30 minutes a week in face-to-face dialogue with their child. Now, I mean proper conversation. So this means that family meals become really important. You know, no devices during a family meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, whatever it is. I think that's really, really important because that's a time when, you know, you do get the good neurotransmitters like oxytocin working where, you know, you feel good from having a meal. Mum or dad gets acknowledged for providing the meal, for cooking the meal, and all of that becomes really important family time. So, you know, I know it sounds very simple to say, well, let's have more family meals, but there's a lot of research to show that more than 5 or 6 family meals a week is really important to just the welfare of children. Brett, what would you say to that?
Yes, and look, I agree, and I've actually got a question for you, something that I get asked quite often now. I don't feel that I'm qualified to answer. What would be your recommendation in general terms as to how long before bed should games cease?
Mm.
And does it have a big effect on sleep patterns?
Sure. Professor Twenge says certainly no more than 2 hours of digital entertainment in a day. Now that's across all ages. When I work with a child, when I'm working as a private tutor, I always say to the parents, I want an hour before I tutor that child and I want an hour after that child is tutored where they are device free. I really want their brain to be prepared for the learning. I want them to have the time, the one-on-one, where I can watch the micro expressions on their face. I can give them that absolute deep dedicated time to their learning, to their study, to my teaching with them, to the questions that I ask. I can't ask the right questions unless I'm really following them. And then I don't want the interference of anything that is device related after that, unless of course I might have given them something to look up if they're doing, you know, The Handmaid's Tale or whatever, you know, they might do that. But I really would prefer that time. For me, I would say at least an hour and preferably an hour and a half before bed, Brett. And, you know, even Chris Anderson, who was the previous editor of Wired magazine, said he said there were to be no screens in the bedroom, period, whatever, because he just understood that it's far too distracting.
Yeah.
over to you.
Look, I'll take this opportunity. I'm going to share 3 files for you to download. This will pop up on your screen to be able to download. So I'm sharing those 3 files, and it's my 5 principles, a link to my free ebook that outlines the benefits of putting those principles in place, and also how to go about it, and also an expanded free ebook in relation to gaming. And it talks about a whole range of different things in relation to online gaming, things you can consider when it comes to your kids' gaming. Now, Jill has some great resources on her website. You'll see that on the screen now, jillsweetman.com. I'm going to share a couple of her links as well. Jill has a free ebook, so I'm going to put that in the chat. I'm just going to copy that up now. And I really encourage you to check that out as well. Yeah, Jill, I was thinking, because apparently how games stimulate the brain, and to be able to fall into a deep sleep, how long that would take. So an hour and a half.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because you really want the melatonin to kick in. You want that sense of the body to want to drop down and to naturally fall into sleep. And we can't do that if we're stimulated. I know myself, if I go to bed and I think I'm going to look something up, or I get caught looking at the news feed, or I'm looking at a catalogue, and I know that my sleep pattern, I've missed the lead in to the first cycle of sleep. And if I'm noticing, I'm sure it's affecting the children as well.
Yeah. Hey, I recommend everybody read Jenny's recent comment. Jenny actually spent 3 hours playing Roadblock, and I hope you're still sane, Jenny. And that made her feel confident to say no. And then she talks about her husband who works with young people, teens, and seeing probably some of the issues. Look, we're not here to bash up gaming, but it does seriously need to be managed. And Poppy, Jill, you may be able to help me answer this one. Poppy has said, would you class TV as a device to limit as well and turn it off an hour and a half before bedtime?
Yeah, gosh. Ideally an hour before bedtime, but I'm at the stage where I would rather a child sit with their parents and enjoy a television program as a family activity than to see everybody separated in their rooms and looking at their personal devices. So if they're watching a movie and it's lovely and you're all together as a family and you're sitting there, with your arms around each other, or just, enjoying each other's company, being in the presence thereof, I think, an hour is fair enough. But it's a great question, and thank you for asking.
Well, Andrew's actually reaffirmed that. He said he would suggest a minimum of 1 hour before bed so the brain can calm down. But I might just say something in relation to Poppy's question. I saw another medical professional speak at a conference, and he said that televisions are different to actual devices.
Yeah.
He said all of the devices, no matter how big the screen is, emits the same amount of blue light. He said on a mobile phone, it emits the same amount of light that a 75-inch television does. It's just concentrated on a small device. Mm. He said the other thing with television is this. He said the content isn't so much that it is very rapid and continually rapid with so much happening all the time. It's more a story. Yes. In so many different ways, whether it's reality, whether it's a movie, it's more of a story. And he said, so it is different when it comes to watching television as it is on devices using programs such as gaming sites.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brett. And also the fact that with games, you have these rapid images and the noise is often very loud and one thing's morphing into the other. And that and the constant dopamine hits that you're getting from that is really very tiring. It's taxing on the body. It's really asking a lot. So television by contrast
Poppy just made a good point. She said TV is passive. The gaming requires the interaction, which would overstimulate the brain, I would say. But you know what, also in saying that, there is also this phenomenon now, and Jill and I was talking about this recently, and there's a program you would have seen on the screen called Twitch. That's not where you go to play a game. That's where you go to watch people play games.
Yeah.
So now we're even away from interacting in a game and thinking at some stage to where we're just consuming what other people are doing. And there's language in there that would be inappropriate for children, and people can communicate and connect. And it's very, very, these games are very, you're drawn into it, into what other people are doing online. And it's like YouTube, where you just watch one video after the other until you find you can't get out because they're just streamed in, consecutively. So, look, there's just those things to think about as well. Yeah, TV puts me to sleep too, Robert.
Brett, may I make a comment?
Yes.
And it's in relation to what Poppy was saying. You know, even though children and adults, of course, forgive me, we are talking children primarily today, even though they're interacting with a game, it, believe it or not, is more passive because they are not really being actively creating their entertainment. They're reacting to what they're doing, but they're not necessarily the actors the way we would really think about in terms of being creative. So, and what you were saying before about esports, and there are 1 billion people worldwide who are just watching other people on those platforms like Twitch playing the game, and that is even more passive. So while it may be entertainment in one context, and certainly it is for very many people, it isn't actually stimulating the brain in a way that is growing. It's not growthful. Does that make sense when I say that? Absolutely,
it does. It does. Hey, Brendan's asked a question in relation to what research has been done into cooperative-based games, and we could put / educational games even. Surely they are good for kids, problem solving together. Look, I think in the mainstream programs, some of them have good concepts. You can say that something like Minecraft, it encourages creation because you build things. It encourages teamwork. You can work together. And in certain doses in a controlled situation, I believe that's pretty good. That can be good. And I actually met a gentleman who goes around to schools running what he says is educational programs using Minecraft, but it's on his server. So it's very, very controlled, and he's tried to have it so it's purpose-driven. So, look, some of the aspects of those games can be good, but then we get into the area whereby at the end of the day, they're there to make money. They want people to stay there. There can be people who are putting pressure on others and bullying. So, but some of those games, you know, I think used in a controlled situation could be pretty good.
I think the thing to be mindful of is that there are games that are supposedly educational, and in reality they're not. So again, as you've identified, Brett, it's important to do the background research. And in addition to Common Sense Media, which is my absolute go-to, I think they're a phenomenal organisation based out of the US. There's also the Centre for Humane Technology that's run by Tristan Harris, who has defected from Google to lobby the tech industry so that what we are feeding people, what we are doing on the internet, is really going to be supportive of people.
Yeah. Look, Robert's got a question. Following the online learning phase with our system leaders promoting greater IT use at school, where does the screen time balance at home? Look, we are in uncharted territory, particularly now. And it's always going to come down to the individual family's decision. So, look, it's a really hard one. Some schools integrate technology into the learning more than others. And I mean, if the school has a heightened policy of screen time at school for education, I think working with the parents to outline that, to inform them of that, so they have the decision to know, well, they have been online a fair bit. We do want to pull that back on that a little bit because we don't want them in front of a screen at the end of the day for hours and hours and hours and hours every day. We want it to be purpose-driven, and of course, school takes precedence. Kelly has said, it seems to make sense to me that online games that stimulate the brain are likely to be more harmful to a child with ADHD. Would that be true potentially?
That's a tough one. From what I am learning and reading, that many children with ADHD favour the computer because it's a controlled situation and they're not being distracted, they're not being overstimulated by other external stimuli. The challenge is that those children who have those, and not just ADHD, but have particular sensitivities, what's really important for those children is real life interactions, being able to look into the eyes of other people and to read faces. And to take them away from that, we're really taking the potential for very important learning away from those children. And Brett, if I may, I had a gorgeous young man. He was in year 12 and he was a pretty heavy gamer, and I had the opportunity to work with him, and I just adored him. And often he would say something, and very, very bright boy, and just spontaneously I would say, gosh, Jeffrey, I love the way you're thinking. My goodness, I hadn't thought about that. And you could see his sit up a little bit straighter and his eyes would be a little bit brighter, and and he'd say thank you. And I felt that maybe I was the only person around him that really appreciated his intellect. And I think a lot of our children are not getting that deep recognition. And I think, to be honest, Brett, I think this homeschooling has been beneficial because it's brought families together where parents have they've got the opportunity to witness their children's learning, to witness those precious aha moments, and to play a role in the facilitation of their child's learning. I think there are a lot of benefits that's come out from this, particularly the dads, that maybe they defer to mum for different things. But I think this has been an important time. What do you think?
I think I've been home a lot more during this time, of course, much to my children's disgust. But, it has allowed us to connect on a different level, and it's just changed the whole dynamics of the house. Look, Poppy has said, could you argue that all games require some form of problem solving? Look, I think in certain circumstances, games can be used to relax and for entertainment. We look at, what we're trying to achieve. I believe, as Poppy has said, at school, the question needs to always be asked, what is the educational value?
Yeah.
And look, every school may decide something. Well, they may decide something different from another school, but definitely. Look, I think in this day and age with devices, I think there's plenty of time for entertainment. So I think school is a good opportunity to show students that the alternate use for devices in education. So I think that's the perfect opportunity, because I think there is plenty of time, particularly most of the games they want to play, for that entertainment value.
Brett, I think it's interesting to note, in Silicon Valley, there are particular schools, and the Waldorf School is one of them, where a lot of the people from Silicon Valley deliberately send their children to these schools and they have no devices at all. Now, these are people who are in the know, and they want their children to have an education away from the devices. Now, it's not to say that the screens don't play a role, but these people are making a very clear choice. I mean, it's, believe it or not, Steve Jobs, from 2010 when he introduced the iPad, his children had not used it. So, and Bill Gates didn't let his children have a smartphone until they were 14 years of age. Now, these are the big gurus in the tech industry.
Thought leaders, yeah.
And the creators who are being very protective about their own little cubs. So I'm wondering whether some of us could err on the side of caution a little and look and say, my goodness, these people must know stuff, and they're making decisions that are important for their families. Maybe we could take a leaf out of their book a little.
Look, I have heard that from other experts in the field or other people who are heavily involved in the tech industry. And when I go to schools, quite often I'll speak to the IT department, and they're probably some of the ones who are the most diligent and restrictive when it comes to their kids and technology, because they understand the nature of it and potential negative impacts if it's not managed properly. Jenny said that, look, I like this point. She said, one of my husband's areas of interest is ADHD. Exercise is the best thing to reduce the severity of symptoms. It would be safe to say that the passivity of gaming, if it interferes with the child's physical activity, would have a negative effect on the child. One thing I say is this: when a child's gaming, something else has got to miss out. There's only 24 hours in the day.
Yes.
So for the period of time they're gaming, something else is being sacrificed. And that's what we need to balance it against. That's why we think, are my kids engaged in sport? Are they exercising? Have they got other interests such as music or theatre or dance? And to really balance it. And I agree with Jenny, it is very important. And that's probably coming down to having that balanced life.
Yeah, and Brett, there's a wonderful film that's only just been released this week called Screened Out. I really recommend people seek it out. It's been driven by Melanie Hempe, Hempe. And it really is a wonderful, wonderful program, documentary style. And in that, people talk very much about the fact that, gaming has its role, but there are so many other things. Brett, you've just said, if it takes over the child's life and they're not doing their dancing and they're not doing their soccer and they're not just participating in family activities and chores and meals and so on, that's where it becomes really important that we need to restrict the amount of time. And I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Look, I think that might do us tonight. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half.
Have we?
Yes. Couldn't stop you talking, Jill.
Oh.
Look, thank you so much. There's still 32 people. Only a couple have left, and they probably had, responsibilities. Look, it's been fantastic. The engagement is awesome. I really appreciate the numbers. I do apologise again for the clunky registration process. Nothing I could do about it. It was the platform. So I tried to give everybody the opportunity to join. Look, it was really good. And one of the things I've enjoyed is the input from the attendees who had their own areas of expertise, whether it's in their occupation or whether it's in their own lives with their own families. So, look, thanks so much. No one's on their own. We all are in this together. Drop us a line. You can see our Facebook site there to ask a question if you'd like. I share things there. I'm trying to get better at using social media. I'm a bit standoffish as a result of my previous occupation. It scared me off a bit. So, look, thanks so much again. If you couldn't download those files, you should have been able to. Let me know. And hopefully we get to speak again. Some of you I know personally, and I've been to your schools, so hopefully I get to speak to you face-to-face in the future. Thank you so much, everybody.
And thank you, Brett, and thank you to everybody who's participated today. It's been an absolute joy.